and thank you so much for joining us on the Reframe to Reform podcast. Our mission is to have the difficult conversations about how we can reframe the way society thinks about those who have been justice involved. We know change is possible, and above all else, people do not lose their innate worth once they have been behind bars. I am your host, Callie, and I am honored to be joined by special guests who have been directly impacted by the criminal justice system. So join us on this adventure where we speak candidly about the topics that matter most and challenge some of society's most common biases so that we may grow together. Let's get started.
Hello and welcome. I am so excited to welcome another wonderful guest to the show. Please welcome Rodney Derrickson. He is the founder and director of the Prisoners' Lives Matter PA campaign. He's also a peer support specialist, paralegal, prison and criminal justice reform advocate, as well as a community leader, entrepreneur, and an up-and-coming author as well. He has spent approximately 30 years incarcerated within Pennsylvania, and he's here to share some of his unique insights into the topics that matter most. Hi, Rodney. Will you share a little bit about you?
Hey, how you doing? Thank you, Kelly. First, I want to say thank you for your invitation and inviting me to your podcast. Reframe to reform, I feel like is a very much needed concept when we talking about reframing and rebuilding what reform looks like. Too often we have this notion of reform, and it's a lot of components that goes with it. And so I appreciate the work you're doing, and it's an honor and privilege to sit here and talk with you on your podcast.
Likewise.
So just a little bit on me and just the background, as you alluded to earlier. I was wrongly convicted. I went to prison at 17 years old. I just recently was released on December 15th, 2024. So I have about approximately 95 days home. So I've 30 years. I'm a certified paralegal, peer support specialist. I also did a lot of advocacy work while inside. I was also a jailhouse lawyer. So I feel like, I have a unique perspective and lived experience that I would share with you and everybody that's listening. Um, yeah, and I'm like I said, it's an honor to be here, and I'm looking forward to just having a conversation and connecting on the issues that matter the most.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for taking the time out. I know your schedule's busy, especially after 95 days out. You got a lot going on.
Yes, yes.
So, what was it like kind of getting some of those certifications or some of the credentialing you described while you were behind bars? How difficult was that?
Well, for me, if early on when I came to prison, I was functionally illiterate, so I couldn't read or write, and so that was a struggle for me. You know, fighting and battling a life without parole sentence. One of the things that I realized that I needed to do fast was to educate myself and apply myself. And so what I did was I reached out to some elder lifers and some old heads that really cared about me and my growth and development, and ultimately wanted to see me get out of prison because they too um, understood and believed that I was innocent. So and that it was a law library. I used to stay in the law library just about every day. Early on, I used to open the book. I didn't know what the words were, but I had enough common sense to at least open the book. And ultimately, and I started learning. I've applied myself, and I became a really good, skilled jailhouse lawyer and advocate.
That's awesome. What kind of pushed you to become that jailhouse lawyer? What motivated you?
Well, it was necessity, I believe. It was like I don't believe I had a choice. Again, when you're fighting the system, and then you have a lot of your you know, uh, colleagues or people that's in prison with you, um, fighting the same struggle. Someone has to come, step up and be that person to litigate and just build a hope, because we lack that. A lot of people lack that especially with the system. The system has been broken, and so they needed someone. I needed someone as well to just show me the way and continuing to fight.
Absolutely. Was there one piece of advice from someone that kind of came before you that stands out most from those you interacted in there?
Yes, and there's several, several old heads, but I remember a friend of mine's name is Charlie, and actually he called him Charlie Yop, and he said, he wrote me a letter. Him and I was cellies, and he had, got out around like 2001, 2002. And one of the things that resonated with me was he said, a quote: "Quitters never win, and winners never quit." So, I always kept that in the back of my head and in my back pocket. And that's what some of the things that just, and it was many um, people that just, gave me a lot of motivation, push, and, made me believe in the system again, and a lot also had to do with my faith. I follow Islam. So, a lot of that is built and grounded in my patience and my perseverance and faith. Having faith. And then speaking to your question earlier, and I apologize if I glossed over it. One of the things that I did, encounter was a lot of struggle with lifers being given opportunities for programming and rehabilitation initiatives. The issues were that in their mind, that we wasn't going to go home, so we're going to be just taking up people's spots and time. So, but of course that was wrong, and most of the lifers that I know wind up becoming tutors or mentors or leaders themselves, and you know, um, lifer organizations, being presidents and lifer organizations and leaders amongst those. Um, Organizations within prison. So, but it was a struggle. It was a struggle early on. It was a lot of, I feel like discrimination against, lifers and long termers. And at one time, I even had to file litigation pertaining to employment, me being a lifer at the time. Um, since my sentence was vacated in 2018, I became someone who had a minimum and my maximum was a life sentence, being as juvenile when my case was, vacated due to being a juvenile sentenced to life without parole. The United States Supreme Court case in Miller versus Alabama ruled that sentencing juveniles to mandatory life without parole sentence, excuse me, is was unconstitutional. So I was able to get relief through that angle.
That would take a lot of faith and a lot of motivation to get through that. In those times of struggle, who was there to kind of support you in that shift? Because that's a lot to try to carry 30 years, right? Of wrongful
Yes.
imprisonment.
Yes. So yeah, and so for first and foremost, my mother, has always been there for me. She was the rock and the boss lady. And she had since passed away in 2016, but she was there with me, through everything, and she always believed that I'd get out of prison. Um, and yeah, so that's one thing that I really I appreciate the most is, and I'm grateful because she knew that at some point that I get out. Every day she used to always ask, even when she was, sick, she'd say, what's the status? What's the verdict? You know what I mean? Have you heard anything yet? So, and so I feel great that she was able to know that I had an opportunity to be out of prison.
Yeah. She had that intuition in her that it was going to happen, right?
Yes,
This is
yes.
the
And it's because of my zeal, my passion, and I'm all always when I talk to her on the phone, I always gave her hope, and I never showed any signs of defeat. to my mother, and I never even the people around me. I always led with courage, strength, and optimism.
Yeah. And that's contagious, right? Especially that's needed.
Yes.
Like,
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And it's like love. You know what I mean? I remember this old song. It said love is contagious, and all those things that you just said are contagious. If you be around the people that want to see you, make it, they want to believe, and they believe too. It's going to eventually rub off on you, and you're going to have that same energy. It's synergy and energy that's connected.
absolutely. Yeah. So, from your firsthand experiences, what is it that you saw people struggled with most that were behind bars that maybe the general public just doesn't comprehend or understand what's going on?
Well, some of the struggles mainly is, people have, there was a lack of, support. People's family, as you know, passes on. So one of the great things that I appreciate and I'm grateful for was the fact that I had a family and supporters and stuff that stuck by me all the way. Um, and so, but that's one thing that I've seen a lot of individuals didn't have that support. So when you don't have nobody on the outside, it's kind of like, you build a community within.
But that transition, right, of going from where my support's out there to now I have people in here. Yeah.
Right. So, and we build off each other. But then at the end of the day, people, want visits. They want to be able to have somebody to call, want somebody to be able to just show, a genuine interest in their well being while incarcerated. Another thing that I've witnessed was just the lack of, mental uh mental support, what I mean, mental aid and assistance, to individuals that's going through crisis. And as a certified peer specialist, one of the great things that, we was able to do, and I think one of the best things that Pennsylvania Department of Corrections ever did was to train prisoners with, mental health intervention, crisis intervention, and mental health first aid, and also getting individuals certified and becoming peer support specialists, such as myself. That was, I think, was one of the best things that the Pennsylvania Department of Corrections have done with initiative, I believe, from the Department of Justice. So, again, people is just need support. There's a lack of it. The morale, is often is just low, and so that's always been like the issue, especially in Pennsylvania state prisons.
Yeah, absolutely. Have you gotten to witness firsthand, and I'm sure you have, like the power of people's ability to change and grow, even within those confines of the system?
Yes, absolutely, and I think I'm an example of that. But I've seen individuals change, and as you know, when you get older, you mature, and so I've witnessed that. I've witnessed individuals work on themselves, not give up on themselves, and become really great leaders and people that wind up coming out and being released in the communities and doing great things, involved in charitable services and work and starting organizations, nonprofit organizations, working and doing the great things, and also being a family man. So I've seen it. I've witnessed it many a times.
What do you think helps support them? We talked about the mental health component, right? Having actual supports. Is there anything else that you saw really help people make that shift within themselves?
Um, yes, there programs, individuals with programs and workshops inside the prisons, and again, majority of these programs or workshops are facilitated by prisoners. So again, is prisoners helping other prisoners, right? And so individuals take advantage of those opportunities and get better. They build themselves up and they become better people. I can't say that about every prisoner, and I won't sit here and do that. But I know that I've seen and witnessed this too many times that great men that had 15, 20, 30 years in prison that's just doing extraordinary stuff, even when there's no real incentive for them to do that other than their change, their transformation and wanting to, you know, hopefully mend, you know, the bad persons that they might have been or the troubled child that they might have been, you know, so they changed and they want to give back and they want to try to heal inside and outside communities.
Yeah. It's that ripple effect, right? But like you're saying, it's that amazing piece of someone doing it selflessly, right? For their community within, but also for themselves when the incentive's not there, right? If they're not looking at a release date or trying to appeal to the parole board of, hey, can I get out? That takes a lot of powerful internal like fortitude to decide that.
Right. And most of those individuals, as I said, were lifers or that had long football jersey numbers. So parole board ain't even in their, you know, in their mind. Um, but they do good work. They care and they want to serve. They want to help. You know, and I think they're definitely you know, great fixtures in the prison communities that too often don't be talked about. You have some staff members that acknowledge that, but I'm talking about from the outside in, you know, too many, you know, community leaders or stakeholders, they don't understand and know that it's the prisoners, the lifers most of the time, that's keeping the jail together and you know, the old heads that's, you know, speaking to the youth and stopping violence within the prisons and the gangs and stuff like that. They don't understand and see what happens inside, you know, because often we don't do that for any kind of, you know, incentive or credibility. We do it because it's the, you know, right thing to do, you know, to try to intervene and squash beefs and stuff like that.
Yeah. You're talking about having that moral compass that people just don't recognize is going.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's what it is. The more compass to, you know, want to, you know, just do the right thing, you know, even when no one is looking, you know what I'm saying? Or, you know, it's the right thing to do. If you want to stand up and just show, you know, that, hey, this ain't right. You know what I mean? We have to be able to address issues without having to resort to violence and, you know, and I've seen it. I've seen many a times where those situations myself, I've resolved and intervened with a lot of issues before. And because of the respect that both parties had for me for over the years and me, you know, um, being a one who stayed consistent, you know, because that's the key. You have, you know, being a credible messenger and then staying consistent and not wavering, playing the jailhouse politics, you know. People really, the men, they respect that.
Yeah, and people get caught up in that so easily. So for you to be able to keep that distance is powerful. Absolutely.
Yes.
What would you say to someone who says or has a belief that like reform isn't possible? What would you tell them?
Well, I would say that all things are possible if you put your heart and your soul in it, and if you approach the issue with a clear mind. If you come in, you know, with a bias and a certain type of tunnel vision, excuse me, then you know that's the reality. It's not possible. You know what I mean? Um, but if you're a person that really understand that prison is just not made to punish. You know, it's not made to deter. It's also is for rehabilitation. It's for treatment. It's for individuals to get better. 95% of individuals are going to be released at some point, right? So it behooves the community and people on the outside to say, hey, we got to make sure that these prisoners are being treated right. They being treated humanely and with some human decency, with some respect, and so that way, when they come home, they able to be law-abiding citizens and possibly my neighbor without me having to worry about, you know, individuals recidivizing back into the prison system. This is why we have to take serious rehabilitation and treatment and education while I'm inside. Too often, I feel like it's not taken serious, you know. And as I just was telling you about my experience, you know, being a lifer, um, not giving me an opportunity to be able to go to school, and you know, I had to we it literally had to, you know, teach ourselves. It was, other lifers who may have had degrees or got a degree, and they shared their experience and what they knew with us. And so I'm grateful for that. But this is not how the system is supposed to be designed. It's supposed to be designed to give everybody equal opportunity for access to rehabilitate themselves. And that's been a problem. It's been a lack thereof.
Yeah. You speak on humanity and kind of like people being treated humanely. Is that something that you saw occurring, or is that still an ongoing struggle?
Well, it's from in the early '90s. Well, I'm gonna say I went to prison in 1994 December, and I've seen a shift and change in how prisoners are being treated. Before it used to be really bad. And so, but and this is not all staff, because you have some really good staff, right? That really, they serious about their job and they want to help. But unfortunately, you get some of the negative staff that criticize them for wanting to do the right thing. And what happens is it becomes too toxic, and they wind up, leaving or resigning and just, moving on with their lives. So here it is. We had a good teacher or a good, instructor or a good treatment specialist or whatnot. And because they want to help and do the right thing for the prisoner, it becomes a problem, and then they run them out of there, and that's an issue.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. What have you seen kind of be a common theme that society can recognize that might influence why people are going to prison in the first place?
Look, a common theme, I feel like, is, again, real reform. You know what I mean? I'm hearing that a lot, and I'm hearing individuals like the name of your organization, Reframe to Reform. Reframing the whole concept of how we look at prison and how we look at the criminal justice system. Um, and what we're doing to try to help make those issues, make those channels a little bit more better, fair, uh, in those systems. I mean, that's what it is. It's just the system that I feel like is just totally just broken. And so, the concepts that I feel like is having real reform matters, and I feel like that's what we need. We need more of that, and we need more people like you that's out there doing the work you're doing. And there are a ton of people that's now seeing what it is, why it's so important that we make sure that we educating prisoners, we making sure that we training them for jobs, and giving them mental health treatment and care, because these individuals are human beings first and foremost. They're somebody's, father, son, uncle, brother, cousin, friend, and they're in prison, and most of the time they're not getting the treatment that they need. So what happens is it wind up coming back to the community anyway, and the public and society wind up still paying the price, right? And so we have to think deeper and broader into the aspect of um, what we need to do to really reform the system.
Yeah. Are there any prevention ideas that you see or have seen that are effective to try to help keep people out of that cycle before they get in it?
Well, and that's important. So I don't. I feel like prevention is you can't really prevent crime. You can't really prevent individuals from making the decision to do a bad act, but you can intervene. You can intervene in it before it actually happened, right? And so some of the things that I see is that people are doing mentoring programs out here, going to the schools early, as early as possible, elementary schools. I remember when I was like 8, 9, 10 years old, I was, you know, raised in the projects, Wilmington projects in Chester, Pennsylvania. And I seen and witnessed everything around me, and I learned from that. Right. And so cultivating and getting early, intervening early is key. Giving the youth somebody positive to look up to, spending time with them, educating them, and explaining to them why, you know, uh, this is wrong. That being out in the streets and hustling and doing all of the criminal activities and stuff like that is wrong, and investing in them and spending time with them is important. I've seen individuals do that. I have a lot of friends that's out here doing this work. They mentoring youth. They going to the Boys and Girls Club. They creating their own youth empowerment programs but it's key that we do it from elementary school all the way up to colleges. You know what I mean? That's just my my outlook on that.
Absolutely. That positive support right from the get go before someone gets in the system to help prevent it. Absolutely.
That's right. That's right. And intervention is key. It's key towards early stages, and you should see these children that they are smart. They know what's going on. They're not they're not stupid at all. They're very smart. They're very smart, smarter than I was when I was young. You know what I mean?
Yeah, they're exposed to so much now, right? They
Yeah, yeah, of course. Yes, yes, that is key.
What do you think we can do to cultivate some places of healing instead of institutions which perpetuate that trauma? Right? How can we shift? We talked about the reform. What can we physically be doing to make that shift, do you think?
Well, again, doing all of the work that's being done now that I'm saying, like I said, spending time with youth, having activities with youth, educational activities, and emphasizing the importance of family and love and freedom. Sharing stories of individuals that's been in prison, like myself, for 30 years at 17 years old, right? It hopefully would deter individuals from going the wrong way. Say, look, if you like everything out here being free, being able to go to the store and buy things like you want, eat the food you want to eat, you know what I mean, and just have freedom, then you probably want to think twice about committing a crime and going out there doing something silly, because inside it's miserable. It's bad. The food, everything is just horrible. And I would urge them to just say, just stay away from the crime and violence and all that stuff, because ultimately you'll wind up getting locked up. You'll wind up going to prison, and then there's no loyalty at all. You got individuals that, as soon as something happened, they get something bad on you, and next they turning evidence on you and testifying against you to get a deal. So it's really not. It's nothing in the game anymore. It's not loyal to anyone.
Yeah. It's people saving themselves, right? When they're in that high
That's
school
right.
situation.
Yeah, that's right. You know what I mean? Get out of jail on an installment plan, and the get out of jail free card type of thing. Don't be the victim. Don't be that kind of victim. You know what I mean? Where somebody can use you and then, what I mean, see you suffer. Yeah, and that happens a lot. That happens too often. But I feel like people are not speaking about it, and therefore, this is why these things is reoccurring.
Yeah, that cycle. Absolutely. If you could say anything right now to your younger self, what do you think it would be? What would you want yourself to know earlier on?
Oh, well, I would have said, listen to my mother, you know what I mean? Because she always was telling me, get out of them streets, get out of them corners. Them friends ain't your friends. They, this, that, and the third. So I wish I'd have listened to my mom, right? And then there was also a lot of, elders that really, that cared, obviously, about the community and our upbringing. And so they would, give me words and of advice and encouragement, and I just wouldn't listen. So I would listen more. I would listen. I would go to school. I would have went to school. I would have took that serious, and yeah, and I would have told my young self is to listen and and pay attention and stay away from prisons and juvenile facilities.
Just don't get involved in the first place, right? Yeah. So understanding, we keep coming back to this theme of education being so powerful and kind of linked to the ability to stay free, right? How can we promote more equitable education in our systems where people have that shared chance?
Emphasizing the power of it. You know, the power of education. Education is power. That's real power. You know, violence, and it's just an act at the moment. It's an impulse, right? That you have at the moment, and there's no power in that. It's an illusion, right? It's an illusion. But real power is being able to educate yourself, take care of yourself, your family, being responsible, and being productive in your community, right? Being a leader in a positive way in your community. That's real power, right? So I would just emphasize the importance of just exposing the youth to education and positive mentors. You have a lot of like basketball players, NBA players, and football players, and all that that's doing great things. They themselves mentoring youth, and they exposing them to things that these youth never been exposed to, like these games and the championship game, being able to go here and spend time with that big brothers and big sisters and stuff come to my mind, right? When you talk about people that's spending time with youth. So just emphasizing the importance of education and not just talking about it, but exposing them to it so they can see it, you know?
The different types of education, right? Not the one track for
Absolutely.
everyone.
Absolutely. And this is important that they make the decision, what I mean, as to what they want to do. Sometimes it may not be, a friend of mine, we were just having a conversation about a month ago. He said she was like, she got 3 master's degrees, right? And she's saying that if she had it, she, thought about it years ago, she would have took another turn. But it was her mother that she was, kind of like trying to listen to and obey, and that wasn't the right choice for her. She would have did something vocational. So giving them the opportunity to expose them with to the things that I feel like, or excuse me, to what they feel is conducive to their what they want to do. I mean, and I feel like that's key. They might not want to be a lawyer or a doctor or whatever. They might want to just be, a welder, a certified plumber or something. And we got to make sure that they have those them decisions are made by them. But giving them all the information by all means, giving them all the information so they can fully decide what's best for their future.
Yeah. So providing the resources, but then leaving the autonomy up to them so they
Absolutely.
can correct it.
It's crucial.
Can you speak on some of the challenges that you've faced since getting out, right? After almost 30 years, that's a big adjustment, I would imagine.
Yeah. So, and it's been a challenge, but I'm patient. And as far as financially, I appreciate and thank the many uh, supporters that have donated to my GoFundMe. That's helped me immensely, with clothing and getting the things that I need and help paying my rent and stuff like that. That's very important. Some of the challenges is just not being able to have like the transitional support, like like I feel like should be there. Um, and I think that it starts inside. It don't start here on the day you release. I believe like like the first the year or so, or 2 years that you ready to knowing you're ready to get out of prison, I feel like the system should be set up to where as though they help you with all of the necessary paperwork and stuff to get you in these kind of workshops and trainings and jobs, etc., before you get out of prison. So that way you have a chance. I've seen so many people, um, because of the struggles that they may have encountered their first, 60 days or 90 days out, they gave up and went back to, what they know how to do best and wound up going back to prison. So I think that that would be something that I would, emphasize that we need to improve on is having systems in place before individuals get out of prison that helps. I'm talking about like helping with, filing your action, applications for welfare and getting all your license, your driver license, your IDs and stuff like that. Um, Getting job training programs, temp agencies, and all that involved before you get out. So that way, when you come home, he or she they have a job and stuff waiting on them, all the support, mental health counseling, all that kind of stuff. Is crucial. Just coming out. I had on my own. I went and seen a behavioral health therapist. On my own because I just wanted to do that. I said, look, I feel I've been in prison for 30 years, and, I want to make sure that, what I mean, I'm functioning well. And so that's important.
Absolutely. And like you said, it's that difference of you having some supports to be able to help guide you to those resources versus
Yes,
someone
yes,
doesn't.
yes.
So difficult to find them and get
and and
established.
and to be totally honest and transparent, like I have a lot of support, what I mean, with family, friends, and I have professors and people that's invested in me, and that I've built relationships in 30 years while I was in prison, so a lot of people don't have that. What I mean? So it's a little different. And as I just said, the support of individuals in that GoFundMe and helping me in that capacity. A lot of individuals don't have those resources. I'm actually in a nonprofit organization that's kind of like a transitional. It's just starting, and it's a house. It's not like a halfway house. It's like real living space. You go get your own groceries. You cook your own food. You live in like a regular house, but I pay rent. Um, so we need more a transitional support like that. What I mean, other individuals inside that actually been out here about 6 months, 8 months, so they able to navigate and help you navigate too. So that's crucial as well.
Yeah. And I know organizations are coming up with those resources, but they need to tap into all the states, right? Because all the states need support. And there's so many people coming out that there's an overwhelming number of people that need the resources.
Yeah, yeah. And there's like you have United Way, you have a whole lot of different Salvation Army, and you have a whole lot of churches and places that's doing a lot of great stuff. That's helping food pantries, that's helping individuals. So all those resources, they help. They really help. But I definitely know that it could be more funds and support helping these organizations as well. I mean, you had one organization I just heard about, they was actually helping with rental assistance. You know what I mean? And they just didn't get the funding this year for some reason. And so they had to shut their program down. This kind of stuff shouldn't be happening. We should be embracing that and investing in that more, because that helps that helps everybody, it helps everybody.
And like you said, describing where people are going back in that first 60, 90 days out because they don't have resources, but they know how to make money quick, right? So they turn back to that old cycle because it's what's known. And if we don't
Hmm.
teach new skills, how can we expect people to use new skills?
That's right. So, yeah. So again, and my idea is, if you're ready to get released within 2 years, start there, start right there, filling out these paperwork, contacting these temp agencies and companies, and there's a lot of second chance businesses and companies and corporations that's hiring prisoners, right? So contacting them early on is the key. Saying let's go inside the jails and train them now, so that way they hired right when they get out of prison. Give them a couple weeks, like probably a month to adjust and all that, but at least they got a job.
Yeah,
You know,
having that lined up would make a huge difference. Absolutely.
It's college. It could be for college. It could be, and there are some programs that's happening in Pennsylvania. You got inside out programs, and you have colleges like, for example, Penn State goes in, Villanova goes in to prisons and offer, bachelor's degrees and stuff like that. So it's happening, but it needs to be it needs to happen on a bigger and larger scale. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. Are there any lessons learned that you would like to share and any final thoughts?
Um, Lessons learned. again, I got to go back to mom again. You know what I mean? My lesson was that me not listening to my mom, it put me in a situation where I could be falsely accused of a crime that I didn't commit, and ultimately had me in prison for 30 years. Um, just being around that atmosphere and that the areas of just violence and crime. So I wish I would have just able to I wish I would have listened to my mom, heed her advice, and some of my final thoughts would be a lot of individuals in prison are suffering, right? And this suffering is serious. Prisoners are humans. We are people. Prisoner rights, I feel like, are human rights, and I feel that it behooves society to care more about what's happening inside. The prisons. Contact the state representatives. The superintendents and wardens in your communities, and to express that you care about how the prisoners are being treated. Are they being educated? Are they getting the mental health treatment that they need? Um, there's a Felder. I think I always have a problem pronouncing his name, but I think it's Davidovsky. And in his book, The House of the Dead, he said the degree of a civilization in a society can be judged by entering its prisons, right? So what do that say about us as a society?
We have a lot of work to do.
That's right. So that would be my final thoughts.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. And how can people get more involved with supporting you and some of the work you're doing?
Well, as while I was in prison in 2020, I started the Prisoners Lives Matter Pennsylvania campaign because, again, this I think prisoners' lives do matter. I think and from a human decency standpoint. So I started that organization. I started the organization, so I'm actually going to be hitting the ground running with that since I'm home now. And one of the things that we're going to be doing is creating a prisoner bill of rights, and we're going to be advocating that, lobbying that to the legislature, the Pennsylvania legislature. Um, and so, the support we have a general social media individuals that's interested in learning more about the work we're doing. It is Prisoners Lives Matter PA. It's on Instagram. Also, I have my own Instagram, Rodney Home 30, meaning home after 30 years. And we have also Bring Rodney Home Instagram, which was the program from Making an Exoneree and Georgetown University that kind of helped me in a position to where as though put me in a position where as though I'm out now. Excuse me. So I definitely want to shout them out for the extraordinary work they're doing. And yeah, if individuals want to continue to support me and I have a GoFundMe up. It's Rodney Derrickson. You have the links. Also, I'm on LinkedIn. People can search on LinkedIn. I'm there, Rodney Derrickson. So yes, and any support, any insight, encouragement, motivation, and stuff like that that the people want to give me, I'm willing to hear and listen. And thank you so much for your support, Kelly. And I appreciate the work you're doing with reform to reframe to reform. Excuse me. That's a great concept, and I just got to really make sure I grasp that because it means so much, right? Um, so yeah, that I just appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for joining us today, and I will absolutely make sure I put those links in down below so people can follow through and follow up with them. And thank you so much for your time, Rodney.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.